Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, The Real Super Sam. Today is a forgotten Spider-Man Rogues video and I hope you enjoy. The Rose is a forgotten Spider-Man villain I really like. He is a super smart, well-mannered and speaking criminal gang leader and even works with other more powerful supervillains from time to time. Rose is really Richard Fisk, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin's son. Originally he called himself the Schemer to destroy his dad's criminal empire since he disagrees with it. Then, in the future, he becomes the Rose. Of course, there is more than one person to be named the Rose, and here I am going to go through all of them. The Rose, I would put as one of the smartest street-level Spider-Man villains, since he runs a whole mob that is loyal to him, and deals with superpowered criminals and the Kingpin of crime. So here is some stuff about his Spider-Man villain, named Rose. This guy first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 253. The Rose is paying the star football player of the Mammoths to throw the games. He gets fed up with it and basically tells the Rose to shove it. Because of that, the Rose sends some guys to break into his apartment and kidnap his little brother, and they come and have a talk with him. Nestor comes, the football player comes, and takes the guy's gun and threatens the Rose with it to release his brother. The Rose still acts calmly and is in control of the whole situation. Here, he reminds me of what Lex Luthor would do. Spider-Man sees all this going down and just drops in, kicking around all the Rose's men to rescue the kidnapped guy. Smartly, the Rose gets away by causing a falling of crates on the Nestor, so Spider-Man leaves him for later. One thing, the Rose actually tells Spider-Man that he doesn't want to fight him at all. Anyway, his very next story was in the spectacular Spider-Man issue 95. We learn that the Rose dislikes the Kingpin, but still works for him. Soon though, the Rose will bloom. Next, his story continued throughout The Amazing Spider-Man issues 256 to 259. The Rose gangs have been attacked by Spider-Man too many times, so he hires a man named Puma to come to New York to kill him. The Kingpin hears about this and quickly calls a meeting with him and Rose. He does not make big decisions like that, and the Kingpin will be the one to decide when Spider-Man dies. This actually pushes the Rose's inhibition to take down Fisk even more. As coincidentally as it is, soon after that, the Hobgoblin offers his services to the Rose to kill Spider-Man. This team will have the Rose apparently become more powerful than Fisk and get rid of his Spider-Man problems. The story continued in Amazing Spider-Man 260 and 261. The Rose's plan is to use Hobgoblin for his own goal of taking down the Kingpin, then he will have Hobgoblin executed. To do so, he even has Hobgoblin's equipment moved to one of his warehouses, but that is all for the Rose here. The next moments for Rose were in issues 275 to 276, which is just the Rose checking up on Hobgoblin, confirming these two are still working together after all this time. The next big thing for the Rose was in Amazing Spider-Man issues 286 to 288, because in here, the Rose changed forever. It starts off with the Rose, aka Richard Fisk, visiting his mother in the hospital. She actually wakes up and speaks, remembers him, but then the doctor pushes him out. Then one night, during one giant fight with Spider-Man, Hobgoblin, and Jack-O-Lantern, he and his henchmen are shooting at other henchmen, and the Rose himself gets shot in the shoulder. Running out since Hobgoblin left him, he accidentally bumps into a rookie cop, and, not going to let his crime empire go down like this, he actually shoots the guy, and he dies. Rose was never a violent thug, never imagined having to do something like that, and it destroys him on the inside. After things within his personal criminal circle fall apart, he reminisces on how bad being the Rose has actually been for him. In the end, there's a legendary confrontation for this guy between his father, Kingpin, and himself, the Rose. He blames his dad for what happened to his mom, but Kingpin explains that the whole thing and ultimately proves that he loves her and saved her life, so Rose walks away from this whole thing with Wilson Fisk and Vanessa Fisk. He was in issue 289 too. The second Hobgoblin, Jason Macendale, kills the rest of his crew and is about to kill him. Instead, Rose talks his way out of it and Hobgoblin Macendale flies away. Next came one of his greatest stories in Web of Spider-Man issues 29 and 30. And yes, I should mention that the Kingpin does know by now that the Rose is really his son, Richard Fisk. The story picks up right at the end of Rose's time in Amazing Spider-Man issue 289, where he gives up his crime den in there and burns the Rose mask, especially since his greatest friend, Alfredo, died. Issue 30 has Richard Fisk go to a confessional and tell his story. This issue is the Rose's origin, everything before issue 252 and after he called himself the Schemer and fought the Kingpin, back in Amazing Spider-Man issues 83 to 85. It started when reporter Ned Leeds, still believed to be the real Hobgoblin, questioned and followed him around for a story on the Kingpin, his dad, and it had Richard become ashamed that he was beaten by Kingpin so easily. Then the issues in Daredevil, The Kingpin Must Die, happened, and Richard decided he had to stop his father's criminal empire. It went too far, so the Hobgoblin convinces Rose to wear a disguise, and he makes it less scary by making it deep violet and wearing glasses, and decides to call himself the Rose. He tells the preacher the rest of his story until he gets into a part of him killing that rookie cop. Then he freaks out and runs away to his father and surrenders. He will now work for him. The beginning of the end of Richard Fisk Rose began in Web of Spider-Man 87 to 89, and let me tell you, it gets complicated. In this story, Richard Fisk is training against some warriors for his father's orders and acting brutally to prove his father wrong about him not being as good as his successor. This new Rose around is working with Richard Fisk, and Richard Fisk put a hit on Peter Parker, who had made photos of him and his Sergeant Bloom together. This new Rose thought they went too far after that and asked Richard to stop hunting Parker, and Spider-Man Richard Fisk canceled his alliance with Bloom then. This new Rose, Bloom, gets betrayed by Richard Fisk and apparently gets shot to death by him after Bloom and Spider-Man had united themselves to stop Richard, who had become the new Kingpin at the time. Well, sort of. Bloom was killed by Richard's men. After that, a new person, apparently Alfredo, who is still alive even after of Spider-Man issue 29, becomes the new Rose, but he calls himself Blood Rose. Richard Fisk, who has changed his appearance to be bald and now look like his father the Kingpin, who he is now basically acting like a Kingpin too, he and Blood Rose fight each other, and at the end it seems like Blood Rose shoots Richard to death. The last appearances of the first Rose was in Web of Spider-Man 97 to 100. Blood Rose is still going around destroying the Fisk criminal empire, but specifically Richard Fisk survived and has gotten away from the area he fell into the water, apparently being shot to death in front of Spider-Man. He escaped on a boat and has woken up on an island with a guy named Trench. Trench has killed all of his friends who arrived with him there, and he is the only one alive. Richard Fisk trains with him and becomes stronger with training. In Manhattan, Blood Rose goes after the Foreigner and anyone else who could inherit his father's criminal empire. Or Kingpin's criminal empire. Richard Fisk, now calling himself Gauntlet, escapes the island on a hidden boat Trench kept. It turns out Trench is secretly the superhero Nightwatch. And it all turns out this new Rose, calling himself Blood Rose now, is really Richard Fisk, the real one, and the bald guy we thought was Richard Fisk this whole time was really his best friend Alfredo, who is still alive. Yep, Alfredo got plastic surgery to pose as Richard, being in his father's organization. And yeah, that was really the whole confusing part. Anyway, the Blood Rose gets attacked by the new enforcers. Spider-Man in his spider armor jumps in to help, and while on the ground, Gauntlet returns in front of Blood Rose. Alfredo has gotten lost in the role and is now attacking his friend Richard. Spider-Man saves him, unmasks Blood Rose in front of everybody, and is as shocked as me figuring out what the heck happened, ending his career as the Rose, and eventually, he was killed by his mother Vanessa Fisk in the comics. Anyway, Richard Fisk himself was in a few episodes in Spider-Man the Animated Series. It is heavily said that he would have become the Rose if the show got a season 6. A member of the Daily Bugle staff for a long time in the comics, Jacob Conover, became the second person to call himself the Rose. He first appeared as the villain in Amazing Spider-Man 414, then was in issues 416 and 417. This new Rose has a superpowered hench girl called Delilah, and we first ever see him in the shadows of a limo sending her out to kill a guy. In the end, the Rose expresses his joy in the fact that Spider-Man is going after his arch-rival in the criminal gangs, Hammerhead. The Rose did some Rose things, like getting information by using people he's hired until Amazing Spider-Man issue 436, his last appearance to date. The Rose is furious over what has happened between him and the Black Tarantula, since this new guy has put Delilah in the hospital and took some of his hijacking operations, but the honored leader of the crime world at the moment, Don Fortunato, says that the Black Tarantula is more powerful than him since he got Spider-Man's mask. Fortunato then rips off the Rose's mask and reveals that he is Daily Bugle reporter Jacob Conover. Fortunato then says that it was him who gave Jacob the Rose identity and position in the criminal underworld. In the battle, Jacob tries to shoot Black Tarantula, but Spider-Man with impact webbing stops him for good. The third person to call himself the Rose first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man Presents Jackpot issues 1 through 3. This new Rose looks like an executioner and is way bigger than the last two and maybe more classy. This new hero Jackpot has been getting closer and closer to his synthesized drug, so he hires the villain Boomerang to kill her. Of course, Spider-Man gets in the way and easily stops him. It's revealed that this new Rose is really Philip Hayes. He became the Rose after he lost his funding in gene therapy research after an accident in a laboratory he was working at. The same accident gave Jackpot her superpowers. His last appearance, and really next big one ever, was in Morbius the Living Vampire Volume 2, issues 4 through 9. Morbius has killed the godfather of the city, Brownsville, and has started a gang war against this new Rose. Rose gets in a battle with Morbius the Living Vampire and manages to survive with using adamantium bullets to shoot Morbius with. During a fight between Rose and Morbius later, he uses an ultimate nullifier on him, sending him off a building. Morbius survives. Morbius also sort of loses his humanity in the story, and then goes after the Rose at his hideout. Rose, preparing to die, does his best against Morbius, but then gets annihilated by him, dying. Richard Fisk, the original Rose, had a very small Easter egg in the movie Into the Spider-Verse in December 2018. Wow. Why did I say 2008? Anyway, that was everything important about the Rose's history. This video became a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I think that just made it better to me. The Rose is only forgotten in the aspect of him being an old villain with no real physical media appearances to date. I think the storyline he had in the Morbius comics would be great to see for Morbius the Living Vampire sequel. The thing I like most about the Rose is sometimes he says a line that I completely agree with. Sure, he's a supervillain, but he does make some great points. And the whole history of Richard Fisk just becoming a supervillain to stop an even bigger supervillain, then it all turning on him, makes for a great story in the Marvel Universe, especially with the Kingpin's history. I hope you guys enjoyed this video for my channel's 3-year anniversary on December 2nd. Thank you all for watching and have a good day.